Madam President, I'm honored to be on the Senate floor with my colleague, Senator Scott from the great state of Florida. And we are here to talk about an issue that really matters to both Alaska and to Florida, and I would say it actually matters to the whole country. Let me begin by just saying, like all states, my state, the great state of Alaska, struggled through the pandemic, a lot of challenges. I'm proud to say that with regard to the health challenges of the pandemic, I'm very honored and privileged and proud to represent a great group of Americans, my fellow Alaskans, who came together on the health side despite our huge challenges in terms of a giant state, dispersed population. We worked together, and on so many indicators of health directly related to the pandemic, Alaskans did very well. We were #1 per capita in terms of testing throughout almost the entire pandemic. Remarkably, we've been the #1 state per capita in terms of vaccine distribution, which is a mini miracle if you know Alaska, given how big it is. We had vaccines going out on snow machines, dog sleds, you name it. We were getting it out to everybody in a more efficient way than any other state in the country. And importantly, thank God, one of the lowest per capita death rates in the country. So we're proud of that, Madam President, but our economy, like many, but I would say almost uniquely, is getting hammered. And people are suffering economically first by the pandemic, of course, and now, unfortunately, by our own federal government. Let me just give you a couple examples. The energy sector, very important to Alaska, very important to America. Yes, we still need energy. Oil and gas, we need it. We have some of the greatest workers in the world in my state. The Biden administration thinks we don't need it. They've been crushing my state. 9 executive orders directed solely at the state of Alaska by this administration to shut us down. 9. There's no state in the country getting that kind of attention. We don't want that attention. Commercial fishing. Our state has been what I like to call the superpower of seafood. Over 60% of all seafood harvested in America comes from Alaska. That has been hurt by the pandemic. And the issue that we're here to talk about today, Madam President, tourism. So important to Alaska, so important to Florida. And that's what I want to talk about with my good friend, Senator Scott, to bring relief to our fellow Americans, Floridians, Alaskans, to work to immediately pass the Cruise Act. That is our bill, which would provide relief to coastal communities in our country, in Alaska, in Florida, to enable responsible return of cruise ship activities that are so important to the small business owners in our states whose livelihoods depend on a robust tourism sector. So let me just very quickly, Madam President, mention one thing. Alaska is open for tourism. One of the most beautiful places in the world. In fact, America, you want to come and have a great vacation? Come on up to Alaska this summer. Not only will you have an amazing experience, we just announced 2 days ago you can get a vaccine. Come on up. If your state's too inefficient to get a vaccine, have a great vacation in Alaska, and you'll get a vaccine in Alaska as well. You can do both. You can see the most beautiful state in the country. You can fish, see glaciers, wildlife, climb mountains, whale watch. And if you do that, it's going to help our economy, help the small businesses, fishing guides, hotels. I know Americans want to help one another. That's what we've been doing for the last year. We want you to come up, stay safe, get a vaccine. But here's what we need. To enable that to happen in Alaska and other parts of the country, we need the CDC to better understand their job, their mission, and their role. And this in particularly relates to the issues of cruise ship passengers, the ability for cruise ship vessels to start to return to America's waters as they're doing throughout the rest of the world. Asia, Europe, Latin America, people are cruising safely right now. But the CDC, Madam President, is dragging its feet. They're dithering. I have been meeting, my staff has been meeting with them almost certainly weekly. I've met twice with the CDC executive director. And all we get is foot dragging. All we get is excuses. All we get is guidance that's muddled, confusing, simply unworkable. And here's the thing. In my state, communities are dying. And no one seems to care. At the CDC, the bureaucrats there don't seem to give a damn about what Americans are suffering through right now. Literally. I don't know how many times we can be on calls with them where we get no response. And when people lose jobs and lose businesses, that is a health impact too. So here's what our simple bill does, the Cruise Act. First, it would require the CDC to issue recommendations for how to mitigate the risks of COVID-19 to passengers and crew on board ships. This would be in addition to what the industry has already put forward, and there are over 70 recommendations. Second, our bill would establish an interagency working group that will develop recommendations to facilitate the resumption of passenger cruise ships operations in the United States, in Florida, in Alaska. The recommendations will facilitate the resumption of passenger cruise ship operations no later than July 4th, 2021. Our bill requires the CDC no later than that same date, Independence Day, to revoke the order entitled Framework for Conditional Sailing and Initial Phase COVID Testing Requirements for Protection of Crew. And our bill finally ensures that the DHS and CDC retain all appropriate authorities to make and enforce regulations necessary to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable diseases on individual cruise ships. Madam President, this is a common sense bill. We need the CDC to continue to work with us, certainly, but to recognize that by dragging their feet, tens of thousands of Americans are going to continue to suffer when they don't have to. We can do this responsibly. My state, the state of Florida, want to do this responsibly, but we can't wait any longer. Our tourism season in Alaska is very short. Our businesses need to know that they can open again, and our citizens need help. I yield the floor to my colleague from Florida, whose citizens are experiencing some of the same devastating impacts that my fellow Alaskans are.
Madam President.
The junior senator from Florida.
Madam President, I do want to compliment my colleague. He comes from a beautiful state. While I would like all the tourists to come to Florida, Alaska is a great state to take a vacation. I've had the opportunity to do that a few times, and it's a beautiful state. I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Sullivan and Senator Rubio, for working on this bill that is so important to all of our states, but for sure Florida and Alaska. Many states rely on the success of our ports, our cruise line, and our maritime industries. Throughout my time as governor of Florida, we proudly welcome more than 100 million visitors every year, shattering annual tourism records each year. Every visitor to our state supports small businesses, fuels job growth, and boosts tax revenue, helping increase state and local investments in the environment, transportation, public safety, and education. And it's not just Florida and Alaska. Tourism, including all of our all-important cruise industry, has huge impacts for states across our nation and the thousands of jobs that rely on its success. In this chart, you can look at this. So first off, the cruise industry shutdown is killing a lot of jobs, and jobs all across this country. Before the COVID-19, we had 450,000 American jobs and $55 billion in GDP every year in our economy. Unfortunately, due to the suspension of cruises caused by the CDC inaction, more than 300,000 American jobs have been lost. So this is all across our country. As we continue to work to recover from the coronavirus and get our economy back on track, I remain committed to doing everything I can to support our tourism industry in Florida, Alaska, and all across the country in a safe manner. Unfortunately, while many sectors of the economy have been safely operating for months under CDC guidelines, Floridians and those across the nation that rely on the cruise industry for work continue to wait for updated guidance from the CDC. For months, I've heard from small business owners who have shared just all their stories about how important tourism is to them, and specifically the cruise industry is to their livelihood and how much the CDC's decision here has hurt them. Let me give you an example. Omar Otero, founder and owner of VOK Protective Services, who says, as a business owner, I've been dependent on the cruise industry for my livelihood for 20 years, and this pause has been devastating. What many people don't see behind the scenes is that cruising has a significant impact on many small businesses and employs hundreds of thousands of people in America. Resuming cruising is critical to my business and will allow me to work again and support my family. Jeanette Pinheiro, president of Cruise Port Destination, who says, the uncertainty we've been living with this last year is probably the most devastating mentally for a business owner. I have former employees that are still unemployed. They want to get back to work, and there's been nothing I could do. The cruise industry needs to be treated on par with other sectors of the travel industry, and this legislation would provide a plan to safely resume cruise operations. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the statements from these business owners be placed in the record.
Without objection.
The CDC's refusal to properly address this shutdown is wrong. It's time to get the cruise industries open, and it's going to create jobs all across our country. That's why I'm proud to join my colleagues, Senator Sullivan and Senator Rubio, in introducing the Cruise Act, which says we are not waiting on the CDC any longer. In March, President Biden announced the effort to vaccinate all Americans, his plan to vaccinate all Americans by July 4th. As of this week, all adults will be able for COVID-19 vaccines. Our nation has made enormous progress in fighting COVID-19, yet the CDCs continue to act like we're still in March 2020. Meanwhile, as my colleague from Alaska said, there's cruising all over the rest of the world. My colleagues and I are simply asking the CDC to provide a timeline when the cruise industry can begin to reopen like so many other sectors, and the Cruise Act ensures they can do that in a safe manner. The CDC is treating the cruise sector unfairly, while other industries are open for business. There is no reason why America's cruise industry and the thousands of jobs that rely on its success should continue to suffer. Cruises can and should resume, and we're going to do everything we can to bring back cruising safely. I reel back to my colleague from Alaska.
Madam President.
The junior senator from Alaska.
Madam President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Help be discharged from further consideration of S. 1105 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
The senator from Washington.
Madam President, reserving the right to object. I understand the position of my colleagues from Alaska and Florida who want to see a return to cruising by July 4th. I'm there with them. The cruise industry in my home state supports over 5,500 jobs and creates $900 million in annual local business revenue. Those jobs and that impact on the local economy have been severely disrupted. But we have to ensure the safety of our friends and our families on these cruises before they disembark. We have seen firsthand how devastating COVID outbreaks on cruise ships can be. Just last year, we saw thousands of passengers stranded on cruise ships, people put in quarantine, or refused entry to ports as borders closed. Over 31 million Americans have contracted COVID, and 560,000 have died from this disease. Cruise ships require specific focus and protocols in place to prevent future outbreaks. While I'm as eager as anyone else to see a return to travel, we cannot cut corners. Doing so risks lives and will only further delay returning to normal, hurting our economy more in the long run. We must trust the science, and we must allow the CDC to continue its work to help us return to what we love, as safely as possible. So I will continue to work with CDC and the administration as they develop the next phase of their cruising guidance. But for now, I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President.
The junior senator from Alaska.
Madam President, to my colleague from Washington, who I have the utmost respect for, it is true that at the beginning of the pandemic, there were all kinds of challenges with the cruise ship industry. There's no doubt about that. We saw that. But that was well over a year ago. We didn't know anything about the virus then. We didn't have vaccines then. And we didn't see the economic devastation then. It is a very different period right now, a year later. Madam President, what we are asking for is the CDC to move. That's what our bill does. You know, Senator Murkowski and I had a meeting, our second meeting with the CDC director just 3 weeks ago. And in that meeting, she told us that they were going to issue all the guidance for the cruise ships, issue it all so people can plan. They said that they could anticipate with this guidance that we could meet cruising opportunities to start by mid-July in Alaska. They said that with this guidance, the CDC wouldn't have to be approving every move going forward. And they said they would take into consideration this huge progress we have made on vaccinating Americans. There's huge, in my state, in Southeast Alaska, there's communities with 60, 70, 80% vaccination rates. That's where these cruise ships are going to be going. The unfortunate thing, Madam Secretary, not one thing the director of the CDC told us turned out to be true. That's not good. Her staff or somebody in the CDC needs to be held responsible for telling us something that was not true at all. Again, what is happening right now is an economic and health devastation. In my state, the estimates are up to $3 billion worth of damage just in Alaska alone because of the foot-dragging, missed messages, and unresponsiveness when it comes to the CDC's guidances. My friend from Florida just mentioned airlines, schools, hospitals, hotels have all gotten CDC guidance and have been able to open. But for some reason, they are focused on this industry, which negatively impacts thousands of small businesses across America, in Florida, in Alaska. And I certainly hope that the CDC, seeing that we are trying to move this, and it's a bipartisan issue, by the way, will start to do its job. Will start to do its job and make the commitment that was made to me and other senators to get this moving quickly in terms of guidance so we can be having tourism, cruise ships and otherwise in America by mid-July. That's what I was told by the director 3 weeks ago. They need to keep that commitment. Madam President, I yield to my good friend from Florida.
Madam President.
The junior senator from Florida.
Well, I'm clearly disappointed that my colleague from Washington would object to this common sense proposal. The cruise industry, it impacts thousands of jobs, not just in Florida, not just in Alaska, but in the state of Washington. Everybody here, I know, wants to make sure that we can start cruising again in a safe manner. And let's remember, you know what my colleague was talking about? She's talking about what was going on in March and April in 2020. But today, hotels are open, airlines are flying, beaches are open, restaurants are open, tourism sites are open, amusement parks are open, they're all open. But for whatever reason, the cruise industry has made a decision to not allow cruising to happen. And they've singled out this industry and cannot tell any of us why they've singled this out. All we're asking is for the CDC to provide a timeline of when the cruise industry can begin to reopen. The cruise industry wants to do it safely. It's a lot of American jobs, including, I think it's 23,000 jobs and $1 billion economic impact in the state of Washington. So I know everybody says they want to get this done, but the only way this is going to happen is if we make sure that we force the CDC to finally make a decision and allow the cruise industry to get open again in a safe manner. Thank you, Madam President.